Hi, Capital Conversations about Purpose and the Art of Living, Introduction Part 2. I'm David Stone, your host and kind of facilitator. I'm just trying a different format. This is on my iPhone. The previous one was on a Sony camera. I'm just experimenting to see if I can do things as it were on the fly. In this one, I'm going to set out my stall in terms of process and approach. In order to get behind what I can see as the current um, challenges, if you will, alternative truths, the rise of the far right, the appeal of characters like Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate and people of that ilk, I'm going to have to do a whole range of different things. One, and ironically for me, is to tackle the question of identity politics and wokeism. Because what I discern the far right doing is paying a huge amount of attention to attacking the idea of woke. Woke meaning being awake to racism, discrimination, inequality, and disadvantage. How can you be too awake to that? And identity politics, because they see the whole discussion about trans rights, um, personal pronouns as an affront to their sensibilities, while at the same time, this is the key, as attacking woke and identity, privileging their own identities as the bearers of virtue or goodness or proper discourse or clear and precise understanding, uncluttered, unfettered, unbiased opinion. So you see this double twist of irony of attacking what they call postmodernism, um, again in an absurd way, especially from Jordan Peterson, which confuses uh, Marxism and postmodernism, which are completely different things. Basically, they are attacking the kind of Marxist left-leaning progressive idea of there being such a thing as a grand narrative by establishing their own grand narrative. And their own grand narrative is one of the primacy of the Judeo-Christian kind of sensibility and ideology. Anyway, it's a big, big, ambitious project to get behind all that, because I think in order to tackle the idea of alternative truths or alternative facts or whatever they choose to call it, I've got to get into the weft and weave of this problem. And to do that, I have to get into beliefs, the nature of beliefs, the, as far as we can, the issue of consciousness, how it's constructed, definitely the discourses and debates around knowledge, what can be known. I'm a very strong adherent to the direct realist kind of perspective, which I'll come on to in a lot of detail later on. I subscribe to there being an objective morality, which has got nothing to do with God or supernaturalism or some divine spiritualism, which I'll also come on to. My targets and what I'm attacking is solipsism, the idea that your what is real is really just what's in your mind. Subjectivism, which is a kind of extension of solipsism in my view, which is the view that your understanding of all things are based upon the composition of your own thoughts, your own categories, your own thinking processes, and that things like free will, morality, are all relative to how you perceive of them. They're not objectively true. I oppose this. I oppose solipsism and I oppose subjectivism. I will go on to claim that without free will and morality, we couldn't have evolved. Um, we would never have got out of the savannah or from the plains of Africa to where we are, poised to start to inhabit Mars. But that's, preempting the story. In order to get there, I'm going to have to deal with some quite weighty concepts, uh, philosophical in their foundation, ontology, the nature of existence, metaphysics, the nature of reality, and epistemology, the nature of knowledge. My other target is British empiricism. I think British empiricism, as opposed to, if you like, continental realism, is massively misleading, if as I understand it. And I will try to still man each of my targets before I sort of launch into a critique of them. The idea that all knowledge is based upon experience just begs the question to me, because as I look out of my window, there are 10 million different things to look at, and that experience of space, time, dimension, relationships of up and down, next to and beyond, past and present, all for me has to have some, as Kant would say, categories that enable that burst of knowledge to be ordered in some kind of way. So to claim that just experience is the basis of knowledge, I think is wrong and misleading. I do subscribe to the view that experience is necessary as a condition of knowledge, but I don't think it's sufficient. In the same way as I will go on in much greater detail to talk about consciousness and my own view that consciousness will probably never be fully solved, because it's work in motion, as it were. It's work in progress. Sorry, it's a adjective or verb rather than a noun, a thing, and it will never be concluded. So what we're trying to describe can't actually be pinned down. But the reason for my belief in this is because I also think that consciousness is not reducible to the sum of its parts. It's not kind of like physicalist thing, whether it's deemed as being a kind of expression of some underlying neuronal correlation, or whether it's an emergent property from various hormonal, physical, genetic, protogenetic, whatever. I don't subscribe to any of that. My starting point for consciousness is that it's embodied. That is, for me, is part of our body. There's no such thing as the brain in a vat kind of model. How would that work? I just don't go with that. Consciousness for me is a product of how we live. It's not a thing that kind of can be unpacked and discreetly analysed. So I'll come on to all that. Why do I need to get into that? Well, because my opponents or my targets are in the ascendancy. They hold sway. They are carrying the arguments into the economy, into society, into parliaments, into the political sphere, into the media. What Gramsci called the hegemony, the kind of overwhelming ideology of the moment, is predominantly right wing, and I'm disgusted by that. I'm scared of it. I think it's kind of reaction. Definitely, it's reactionary. It's going back to pre-Nazi Germany, Italy. It's going back to a kind of age of empire kind of mentality in which might is right and cash is king. And I, as I said in part one, have got a personal vested interest in trying to see how far we as a species can be said to have made progress, and understand the nature of that progress and to build on it. And I want to do that before I pop my clogs, so that my kids and my grandchildren and succeeding generations can flourish in an environment in which moral purpose and acts of kindness are valued much more than material wealth, status, or money. So how am I going to get into that? Well, I'm going to set out my kind of agenda, as it were. I'm probably not going to stick too rigidly to this, but I'm going to look at things like the nature of belief, the arguments for a realist kind of approach to the world rather than an empirical one. And I'm going to be depending on a whole range of different sources, some of which I've mentioned already. But Peter Adamson's History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps is the go-to source for most of this. And I will be posting a lot of stuff in below with links, so that hopefully any assertions I made, or jargon I use, or words that seem to obfuscate more than they elucidate, will be expanded upon in some kind of account, linking it to either an AI search engine or to an encyclopedia or dictionary. One of the things that I find most challenging is the kind of word salady bullshit of people like Jordan Peterson and Deepak Chopra, who both, and like many others in my view, slide away from a kind of scientific, objective, realist analysis into a branch of metaphysics where they have no right to make the claims they do. The claims are purely speculative. Deepak Chopra is a past master at this. There are definitely areas of metaphysics which are interesting, which need to be examined further than ever before, that I think hold important lessons for how we come to understand things at a deeper level, that can inform our epistemology. But it's the slide from, if you like, both of them do this. You take the scientific methodology, you look at the claims that science makes for objectivity, you applaud that, but you claim that science is only one method nested in this other, much more profound, higher level kind of reality. For Jordan Peterson, that is the supernatural, the spiritual, and the Christian, ultimately. For Deepak Chopra, it's the consciousness which pervades the universe, is the true reality. Both those claims just spring into your mind. There's no evidence for them in any way. And this is the problem. Parts of metaphysics, by nature and almost by definition, have no purchase on epistemology. They can't be known. But I think some other parts can be known, especially around things like morality, which I'll come on to much later. But this is it. This is the trick. People will go along a certain journey, a certain trajectory, claiming a kind of ownership of and understanding of the most robust forms of objective knowledge, and then bang, slide away from the scientific method into metaphysics, but go beyond what I would consider acceptable or reasonable steps into this more abstract, more speculative field of inquiry, to make massively inflated claims about the true nature of reality, which they just happen to know. So that's another major target, is the mystification of knowledge through high-level forms of speculation that have no empirical or other basis behind them. Now, notice the word, I use empirical because I am an empiricist, but I subscribe to a realist version of empiricism, not a British empiricist version of empiricism, which is a necessary condition for knowledge, but not a sufficient condition for knowledge. So, long and short is, in this journey, I am relying upon many kind of conversations that I've already had, that's informed where I've come to this view now, conversations that I will be having going forward with friends and colleagues and family, most of whom disagree with me, and the idea is that we can, between us, establish the foundations in no exaggerated way, but in a modest, minute kind of like shift in the current moment, a movement towards establishing a new kind of enlightenment, one that is fit for purpose in the 21st century and might carry us forward to the 22nd. My partner shot for this video is, this comes from Karl Popper, and it's been amplified and reinforced by David Deutsch. There's no problem, as I see it, in seeing all knowledge, all truth, as contingent. That is, nothing is absolute, nothing is final, nothing is done and dusted. Even, the theory of evolution, the cosmological constant, the speed of light, whatever claims we make to truth, they're all subject to revision based upon improved evidence. So if you come from the space where you need to rely upon fixed certainties like God, or like the certainties of rules of existence, rules of physics, rules of causation, or whatever, you might find some of this quite challenging. I personally don't. I think that we're on a journey and we're evolving, and we're getting into things in a deeper, more interesting way, more profound way sometimes. Sometimes we get closer to a sense of truth, but I don't think we're ever going to get there. Sometimes we move backwards from it and we find ourselves having to revisit our explanations of things. This is the point. What suffices for me is the best possible explanation given where we are at the time and given what we're looking at. The best possible explanation. And usually, not always, usually the best possible explanation for anything comes from a peer process. It doesn't arrive out of the minds of one individual. It comes from ideas contested, challenged, refuted, and having to be capable of being refuted. This is another key aspect of Popper and David Deutsch. If I make a claim for something and it has no chance of being refuted, I can't be proved wrong, then my claim doesn't stand the test of validity for me. And that's true for all the interlocutors and all the arguments that we're going to be considering. If someone makes a claim, say Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, that there's such a thing as a natural hierarchy, and they're basing their claim on chimpanzees or lobsters or something, such nonsense, ask yourself the question, how could that claim be refuted? Now, what would be the counter evidence for it? In physics, the refutation of claims is obvious, right? If you could find something that was going faster than the speed of light, that theory is now revised. In evolution, if you find something in the fossil record that predates the dinosaurs, and it shouldn't do because it's a mammal, it's warm-blooded, that would undermine and refute the theory of evolution. But other theories or claims for reality or clear explanation, like the existence of God, like the natural hierarchy, there's no grounds on which they can be refuted. Any Christian or believer would ultimately resort to their faith being the foundation of their belief. It's not evidential. So you can't refute faith. Faith is that. It's just like faith. Anyway, so this is part 2. I think I might have to do part 3 where I actually lay out some of the kind of like context in more detail to this series of vlogs. In particular, laying out the kinds of philosophers, kinds of philosophies, kinds of issues that are going to be examined going forward, but have also informed the process up till now. So there you go. This is my iPhone version of an introduction to Capital, conversations about purpose and the art of living. I'm just starting this out. I hope you come with me on the journey. It could be extremely fruitful and exciting. It might not. It might just fizzle out into nothing. But I'm at the moment excited by the prospect of joining forces with others who've just had enough with the bullshit that's going on at the moment and trying to reinvent a sense of purpose and hope for ourselves and for our children and for our grandchildren. Thank you very much.